they also need to be full. So that means many people interested in anaerobic fermentation technology. I'm Hong team, come from a Chinese company, Chengdu Daegu environment engineer. So I'm also the biogas registered biogas expert from Agriculture Ministry of China, and also this is the project team leader for ADP biogas project collaboration with Chinese Ministry of Agriculture. So 105 large and middle scale biogas plants in 4 provinces. So now this afternoon we have 6 speakers about anaerobic treatment of fecal sludge with and without co-fermentation organic waste. This is very interesting. I think everybody will learn from our speaker. So I think we have 6 speakers in less than 2 hours. So every speaker has only 15 minutes. So we have only 3 questions after that. I hope we'll leave a little time for discussion after all the speakers finish this presentation. Okay, so this is our first speaker give us a presentation about implementation and process analysis of pilot scale multi-phase anaerobic fermentation and digestion of fecal sludge together. So welcome Mr. Justin Ting, Earth and Environment Engineer, Columbia University, New York City, USA. So please. Thanks.
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah. It's pretty clear? Yeah. Okay, my name is Justin. I'm with Columbia University with the Chandran Group. And I guess I want to begin this by saying our group is pretty excited about being here for this year because, at least for the work in Ghana, it's been in progress for the last 3 years. The first year of construction of the site, procurement of materials. It was a year of operation at the pilot scale, and then the last year it's been the data analysis and doing the modeling work. And so we're really excited to finally be presenting it here. So thanks for being here. So this project is the Fecal Sludge to Biodiesel project. There's actually going to be 3 sessions here at FSM about this project. Right now it's the pilot scale operations and modeling. Tomorrow morning, Kartik Chandran from Columbia is going to be talking about lipid production for DFA, and Atu Fenyan Martin from KNUST is going to be talking about step feeding work that he did at Columbia. And so this is all tomorrow morning. But today, it's pilot scale operations. Okay. So why are pilot scale operations important? Well, worldwide we have a lot of anaerobic fermenters and digesters everywhere, but the scales are all very varied. And in terms of an example that is very, very heavily measured, very heavily monitored, there aren't so many that we can build from. And when we start working with pilot scale fermentation, at this scale, we can actually start looking at variability of fecal sludge as it's coming in. Because a lot of characterization studies, we all know fecal sludge is very variable. But when we start looking at processes, we're not actually incorporating that variability into what's going on. And so by running at pilot scale, we're receiving about half a truck a day. We can actually feel, smell, and see all the variability that's coming in. So this is very beneficial for us. The second is not only are concentrations of fecal sludge varying, we also have to consider the loading volumes. Because as everybody knows, all of these vacuum trucks are different. They're different age, they have different capacities. When they arrive on site, they're not always full. And so what we're feeding in, if you're thinking about you're going to take a truck, you're going to take 2 trucks, you have to account that there's going to be variable volume as well, not just in concentration. And as well with field operations, unmixed reactors is what we're working with, is what we plug in. And with all of this pilot scale data that we were collecting, it allows us to have a baseline for what fermentation and digestion actually looks like when you're processing it on a truck scale. And this baseline will allow us to then form later on conclusion, which I'll get into. In terms of design guidelines, ensure the sizing of digesters in terms of the residence time is pretty key because, of course, you have a very large digester, it's going to be pretty expensive, and somebody might not want to pay for it. And so what we were specifically looking at was, if you wanted to optimize for methane production, how much retention time do you need? And if you're looking at additional resources like DFA, volatile fatty acids, how much retention time? Knowing that if we can limit the size of the reactors, then the costs are going to be down, and maybe this will be up to. Okay. So our project, we had a very strong emphasis on pilot scale field operations, but at the same time, we needed to incorporate process modeling with it. And the baseline data we got from the pilot, but the process modeling allows you to start answering questions about how do we want to size digesters for fecal sludge? How do we want to design these systems? Because right now, these guidelines don't really exist. In addition, if you have a built system and you have a model for fecal sludge, you can start looking about how the reactors are actually performing and how to optimize them. So modeling allows for before and the after. Okay, a little bit of information about what we were doing at the pilot scale. We had 5 months of startup. We used rumen from an abattoir for the inoculation. We ramped up the loading. This was a 5-month period. In terms of full operation, we had 5 months of loading, sampling twice a week. 2 trains of 6 10 cubic meter reactors. In terms of operation, we're only using 1 train at a time. The second train allowed us for a staging, it allowed us if we needed to clear some things out. But the key point is 6 10 cubic meter reactors. So they're good size. It's pretty low. HRT, 2 to 4 day retention time in each reactor. And the measured parameters, it's pretty conventional parameters, but what was different is we paid attention to BFA. And the 3 main reasons is 1, we were looking at BFA as pathways to biodiesel production. 2, it is a process parameter for understanding fermentation and digestion. And 3, it gives us insight into how degraded is this fecal sludge that's coming in. And this is a pretty key point that we're going to touch base on. And gas analysis, gas flow, methane, CO2. In terms of process modeling, what we mean is we use EnviroSim's BioWin. So this is a process simulator that mathematically calculates the chemical and the biological reactions that are happening. And so what this means is each of the 6 reactors that we had were then simulated by these modules through BioWin. Through different time steps, they would calculate what they thought the pH, what they thought these different concentrations would be. I want to again emphasize realistic loading conditions. You'll notice we had 2 periods, period 1, period 2, they were about 2.5 months. Period 1 had very variable loading volumes, and one reason of that is it coincided with the wettest 2 months of that year. And so what happens is there's very heavy rainfall, and that trucks were pretty hesitant to come to our site. We were right next to a waste stabilization pond. It was getting really muddy. We had situations where trucks had to be pulled out by other trucks, so they didn't want any of it. And what this meant was we were trying to be very careful engineers, set loading volumes every day, but it's difficult in the field when you have to rely on trucks that are coming in. And so the volumes get higher and lower and higher and lower because if we missed days, then we would compensate by adding more. Now, period 2, I mean, one explanation is I left after period 1 and somebody else started managing period 2. That's not the reason why. It was that the weather started getting drier, and we said, wait a second, we have another 2.5 months. And this is a great opportunity to start thinking about, we have this variable loading. If we're really good for these 2.5 months, we can make this comparison. Because knowing if you have to rely on trucks, if variability is okay, that's something we really want to know. Right? What is the effect of loading volume variability? Fecal sludge characterization, what we were measuring was pretty consistent with past studies. A lot of variability, so you have these average values, but the standard deviations are just as high. I mean, it's what we were seeing. So the VFA, those numbers were suggesting that fecal sludge was coming in pre-fermented, and to go beyond that, we suspected that it was also arriving pre-digested. And one evidence of this is that occasionally we would load the site in the afternoon, and then in the morning time we would see intensive digester foaming, all of this gas production, and then in the morning time we have to go and shovel up all of these things. And so this was one of the big sparks in our mind of thinking about what's going on in fecal sludge. And what this is showing is it's very active material. It's not just sludge, it's the bugs that are eating the sludge. And this was suggested by these messes we had to keep cleaning up. We can measure fecal sludge through regular parameters, but if we want to go deeper into design, we need to go beyond these. We need to think about what else is in the stream. Okay, process modeling approach. So our approach for the model is we wanted to identify the key characteristics for fecal sludge and for fecal sludge fermentation and digestion. And what this basically meant was when we were adjusting these parameters, we were doing so very carefully with our knowledge of the anaerobic digestion process. Because we wanted to say, in the end, we wanted to minimize the amount of adjustments we were making. We didn't want to adjust 20 parameters, 30 parameters to get some perfect model. We wanted to learn what was happening, what's different about fecal sludge, and what's different when you ferment it and digest it. Evaluated through the calibration, we looked at COD fractionation, readily biodegradable and biodegradable. We looked at that influent microbial concentrations, heterotrophs coming in, antigens. We looked at reaction rates for the 4 key parts of anaerobic digestion. And we looked at the solids distribution because we had an unmixed system, so of course we had some distribution. So these details, we don't really have time to go into them, but during the Q&A or afterwards we can really start getting into it. Okay, here's some results. So these are snapshots through BioWin for the VFA on the top and the gas production on the bottom. The red lines, that's what BioWin is simulating, what it thinks is going on in the reactors. And the blue dots are actual observed values that we pulled and analyzed that came to us. Okay, so let's talk about VFA. What we found was VFA concentrations were actually highest in the influent. That 1,400 milligrams per liter, that was the highest, and it only decreased from there. And this we were not expecting this. We were expecting high VFA concentrations in upstream reactors. We expect material comes in, and now you have your VFA, but that wasn't the case. For gas production, we saw maximum gas production in that same first reactor, which also took us by surprise because we were expecting gas production to be higher in the downstream reactors. And so what both of these are suggesting is, again, the same point. Fecal sludge is active material. It has heterotrophs, it has methanogens, it has material in it that we need to consider. And because of this, that's why we then see VFA only going down and gas production. It's coming in with methanogens, it's coming in, now you're seeing it highest in reactor 1. And so if we start thinking about if we're going to do a new design for fecal sludge fermentation, fecal sludge digestion, if you only care about gas production, you may not want to go for 15 days, 30 days, 60 days, which are the regular numbers. And we're not talking about pathogen reduction. If you're only caring about gas production, you're getting those high efficiencies right in the beginning, and it's something to keep in mind. The other point is, yes, we have this decreasing profile for gas production. But if you remember, we had an unmixed system. So we have decreasing solids distribution as you go there. And even when you normalize for the concentrations of solids in the reactor, and you look at gas production, you still see that from an efficiency point of view, it's highest in reactor 1, and it only goes down as you go down. Final model configuration. I'm not going to go so much into detail, but basically the top 3, we're focusing on the chemical characteristics of fecal sludge. The bottom 3, we're looking at biological, looking at heterophils, looking at antigens. And then the last one was a minor adjustment we made at the end just to match the methane concentrations. It wasn't so necessary, but we threw it in there. And so really, when you look at the bio and default, and when you look at the final model, throughout this year of the calibration process, we considered 20, 30 different parameters. We looked at a lot, but eventually we narrowed it down to these 7 that gave us reasonable results, reasonable goodness of fit. We're matching the trends, we're hitting the peaks, and that's really what we care about. We're not trying to get some perfect model. We're trying to see what we're learning through this process. So we looked at, I forgot to mention, we looked at fecal sludge from public toilets. And I want to mention this, public toilets, that word public comes from the fecal sludge operators, those vacuum truck drivers that are coming in. They say we have public material, we have public material. It is important to note that when they say that, they're referring to some kind of larger fecal sludge facility, some row of toilets. What this means is, these could be dry toilets. These could be flush toilets. If they're having trouble pulling it in, they'll use water or fecal sludge to help suction things out. So in terms of the material, it's very, very variable, but we have to define it as public toilet fecal sludge. So anyway, public toilet fecal sludge, it's going through our system. We were focusing on methane, we were focusing on DFA. But we also know that there's going to be other types of fecal sludge that we care about, pit latrines, public septage, and there's going to be other end products that we're going to be concerned as well. And so knowing that we have this model, we really see this as the stepping ground. So if somebody else wants to start looking at this, they can build from it. So that's why after the paper is published, hopefully this quarter, we're releasing the model to anybody who wants to use it, all of the parameters, all of the equations, so that if you have material, of course you would want to do some calibration. But you can look at our numbers for reference, and you can also look at our methodology for how we were calibrating. Thanks.
Oh, so many purposes.
Okay. So, do you think the 6 reactors in series are equivalent to an anaerobic baffle reactor?
Okay, so if you look at how they're connected, it somewhat explains why you would see the distribution that you have. So the connections between the first and the second somewhat act as a baffle because the connection is on the bottom and it forces the flow path up and down to the second reactor. And wait, let's go back to the solids. Then you can see from the concentrations. Wait. No, there we go. Okay, there we go. So what's interesting is that the solids concentrations in 1 and 2 are actually somewhat comparable, and it may be because of this connection from the bottom. The rest, they're connected at the middle, so it's not so much of a baffle in that it's not forcing the flow path, but it's something like it. It's interesting.
So, Christian?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I was just wondering, did you look at the ammonia inlet, and did you think it was a problem for the digestion?
Yes, we looked at ammonia, and I have to slide at the very end. It's going to be very messy, but it's just so I can have the numbers in my head. We did measure ammonia. It was around, let's see, okay, it's right here. I mean, in terms of millimoles, it's going to be 100, 200. We were concerned that it was affecting the acetoclastic growth rate, and that's actually why, if you look at how we if you look at the numbers we were adjusting, well, one is BioWind will simulate the acetoplastics and the hydrogen trophics group in the program. And we did find that acetoplastics were dominating the system. And with that, when we were doing the calibration, we were having a very hard time making sure there was enough gas production in the downstream reactors. And so we did end up decreasing that acetoplastic methanogenesis rate, potentially from ammonia inhibition. The other thing is it's already coming in with fecal sludge, and because of that, the growth rate within those reactors may also be lower, but it's something we had thought about.
Okay. So, last question.
Hi, since you're on this page, was the influent characterization, was the calibration just based on the data, or did you actually measure these experimentally?
The influent data within BioWind was input as all of the loading volumes that we recorded in Kumasi, and then all of the concentrations with it. So there was COD, there was solids that you looked at.
I'm talking about these numbers in here.
Oh, sorry, which one?
The influent, the fraction of biodegradable.
No, the fractionation, no, we only looked at total COD. These unbiodegradable numbers are from reference. I mean, the person's here now. We found that it didn't have so much of an effect on our model in terms of the VFA and the gas production, but that readily biodegradable number was adjusted a lot. I mean, through the several hundred model runs that we did, that was a pretty key parameter.
So, okay, thank you, Jasmine. Okay, maybe later we will discuss. Thank you. So, simple presentation about lesson learned from the dissemination of biodigester for sanitation in Haiti from 2010 to 2013 from Anthony Kebrick, the sustainable sanitation consulting. Yeah, Haiti. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished delegates, passionate lovers of fecal sludge management, I'm very happy to present to you today lessons learned from the dissemination of biodigesters for sanitation in Haiti from 2010 to 2013. And even happier that I just followed Justin's amazing scientific presentation loaded with data, graphs, analysis. My presentation will be quite different. The research was sponsored by Norwegian Church Aid, which is a Norwegian NGO who work in the field of WASH in Haiti, specifically WASH in schools. And Norwegian Church Aid, or NCA, were one of 3 implementing agencies responsible for the dissemination of biodigesters in Haiti. I will touch upon several themes during my presentation. Sanitation in emergency and early recovery contexts, community participation and community engagement, on-site fecal sludge management and wastewater treatment, nutrient recovery, energy recovery, and even sanitation marketing. So there's quite a lot of cramming. Haiti is a country in the Caribbean. There were 99 biodigesters built as part of the dissemination period. 74 of these were evaluated. 25 are missing somewhere. We don't know where they are. These biodigesters, 74 of them, were evaluated over the last 4 months of 2013. Fecal sludge management in Haiti is very, very basic. Most of it is managed like this, in simple pit latrines. Haiti has the lowest sanitation coverage in the Western Hemisphere, with access to improved sanitation at about 22%, and it's been that way for decades. there has been some improvement in the years since the 2010 earthquake. Oh, pressed the wrong button, didn't I? Here we go. Ah, wonderful. So this is an anaerobic pond, which is part of a series of waste stabilization ponds. And we can see here immediately one of the big problems of fecal sludge management in Haiti, a lot of solid waste. So the large amount of solid waste that is in the fecal sludge waste stream renders much of the technology we are trying to implement, unfortunately, inefficient or even useless. So, why do we have this dissemination period? Well, to understand that, we have to go back to 2010, 5 years ago, after the earthquake. There was a great deal of suffering. There were 1.5 million displaced people living in camps, mostly in the capital, Port-au-Prince. Later on in 2010, there was a cholera epidemic. There were cyclones, floods, and all this upon a country which was already suffering through massive environmental devastation, massive deforestation, and a population who were living in extreme poverty, especially for the purposes of this presentation, energy poverty. What Haiti needed was strong, intelligent leadership. Unfortunately for Haiti, this was lacking in the days after the earthquake. There was no governance. The government of Haiti did not have a sanitation department. There was very little oversight. And there was a great deal of money. Now, into this context came one very impressive example of a biodigester. Schematically, it looked something like this. Human waste in, a dome-type biodigester, gas out, and effluent out. Let's have a look at this one example. There were public toilets, 10 for men, 10 for women, flush toilets, connected to a biodigester. The biodigester itself had a planted gravel filter upon it, on one side of it, and a gas pipeline collecting the biogas. The effluent was pumped to a fish pond where there was a duck. The effluent was used by the duck and by the fish, but also in a nursery. A site like this is really a sight for sore eyes in downtown Port-au-Prince, especially after the earthquake. This one example also used the biogas, which you can see was connected to this simple oven. So this example provided implementers with an idea of something that might work. So what happened was the UN WASH cluster decided that this is something that could perhaps be given a go. So they planned a feasibility study to pilot 25 biodigesters. Well, 40 biodigesters were built in 2011, and another 40 were built in 2012. So it was really a very rapid dissemination process. What was planned by the UN WASH cluster were three things. I can see that I haven't chosen the colors very well, but there are three circles here. Sanitation, effluent, and biogas. The dissemination process was very clear that sanitation was the priority. Toilets, waste treatment, fecal sludge management or decentralized wastewater treatment, and pathogen removal. Pathogen removal, very critical because this was a context where cholera dominated everything. Second and third considerations, which were important, but were not considered essential, were nutrient recycling, so-called biol in Haiti, and biogas. So these are the three objectives of the dissemination process. Now very quickly I would like to ask for your help. I would like to ask you two questions. And just so that we understand the rules of the questions, I have two pre-questions. And I would like you to raise your hand like this if the answer is positive, and put your hand down like this if the answer is negative. So the first question is very easy. Please raise your hand if you like ice cream. Excellent, everybody understands the rules. Put your hands down. Second question. Please raise your hands if you believe that Vietnam is a country in Africa. Okay, this is really good, we're going well. So now here come the real questions. Please raise your hand if you believe that a biodigester as a standalone waste treatment unit is an effective unit to remove pathogens. Shaking their head. Okay, this is good. The second question. Please raise your hand if you believe that human waste produces a lot of biogas. Interesting. Okay, some. Okay, good. Well, I'm very happy with the way you answered those questions, because what happened in Haiti was this. A biodigester was marketed in a way that really focused upon biogas and bio. So all of the planning that went into the dissemination phase was kind of forgotten about. Sanitation, pathogen removal was really sidelined by energy. A biogas gives you free energy, so you don't need charcoal. When you don't need charcoal, you won't need to cut down trees. So biogas can combat deforestation. At the end of the line, the water we collect is completely clean. The engineer plunged his hand in a basin filled with filtered, clear, and odorless liquid. So when you are marketing a technology like this, in a context like Haiti in 2010, this is the equivalent of FSM ice cream. And the biodigester dissemination process sped up and up and up, and it kind of got out of control. Biogas is a very, very effective tool in sanitation marketing. People get excited about energy. People get less excited about sanitation. So the technology was kind of sexed up. It was made very, very sexy. So let's look at what these biodigesters had to go on. They had human waste, excreta and urine, varying levels of grey water and flush water, varying levels of dilution. Some of the biodigesters received hand washing water, some of them received shower water. In very few cases they received animal waste. Yet in all cases, biodigesters were marketed as being effective producers of biogas only with animal waste. So the top toilet is a flush toilet. Here at the bottom is a communal flush toilet where there are several toilets in a row and one big flush took all the waste away. So this meant there was a lot of water going into the biodigester, and a consequent reduction in the hydraulic retention time. So the hydraulic retention time was between 5 days and 30 days. Some of the toilets were simply portaloos that were positioned on top of the biodigesters, and some of them were poor flush toilets, and these actually work best. But solid waste management was a problem in all biodigesters. Here is an example of a biodigester under construction. We can see the dome, we can see the pipes going down into the biodigester. The average size of the biodigesters in the dissemination process was 25 meters cubed. The average cost was about 18,000 US dollars. So quite a lot of money was spent. The toilets connected to the biodigesters were largely functional, regardless of the biogas and the bile, which we will get onto next. 61% of biodigesters were evaluated as having functioning toilets. And functioning toilets meant they were accepted by the users. They were accepted because they were clean. They were clean because they were managed. And they were managed because there was some form of payment involved. So biodigesters that had toilets that had some kind of payment for the management, they had a chance of working and functioning. But not all of them were like that. In all of these cases, where the biodigester toilets were functioning, they were functioning because of the payment, but also because there was someone responsible for the biodigester. The person was interested in the biodigester, and after being interested, they were committed. And in a few cases where there was real success, we can talk about pride. And I think these human characteristics that determine the success of the biodigesters are very important, and I think we really need to think about that when we plan our technologies. The human factor. Some biodigesters really didn't work. Just a very quick example of, here's one, and instead of going to the toilet, in the toilets around the biodigester, people preferred to go to the toilet inside the little hole that was created. So there was a big problem. Here, actually, the biodigester facilitated open defecation, which is a bit of an irony. So a few more statistics. Only a few of the biodigesters had the means to use the biogas, and that means only a few of them had piped connections going to a kitchen. And in all of the cases, the biogas was planned to be used in a kitchen. However, even fewer, only 8% actually produced any usable biogas. And indeed, most of the time when it was produced, it wasn't used. It was just flared. The bile was rarely used. This is an example where the bile coming out of the biodigester is just spilling to this area near where children are playing. And some random sampling of the bile, of the effluent, showed that, in fact, it was very highly contaminated. Here is an E. coli number per 100 milliliters, over 2,400 mpm. So, highly contaminated, which suggests that the biodigesters were not treating the waste at all. I'm wrapping up. So just a few slides to wrap up. First of all, there were some successes, and I think it's very important that we highlight those. And Norwegian Church Aid will be working with these sites to try and further the success, because if we have a little bit of success, it's right that we capitalize on it. There was success when the biodigesters were applied in appropriate context. So dense urban areas, markets, so a lot of fecal matter, a lot of waste substrate for the biodigesters. Rural areas with an active agricultural population who could use the bile, access to animal waste, of course, because animal waste is really what produces a lot of biogas. And the robust management structure, so a strong, well-respected local leader who could manage the site, and there had to be some kind of payment for the toilets. However, mostly there were failures. Some reasons why. There were very high expectations at the beginning. People wanted and expected biogas. People wanted and expected clean effluent that they could use. People wanted ice cream, but what they got was something very different. The participation was really only at the very beginning. There was a lack of participation throughout the process, during the construction, and beyond into operation and maintenance. The dissemination was entirely supply-driven. There were no instances of user groups saying, I want a biodigester. Motivation for community involvement was cash-driven. So, of course, in an emergency context, if you turn up to a community and you say, hey, we want to build you a biodigester, there will be some money involved, communities are likely to say, yes, please. There was no testing, and there was no O&M plan. My final slide, the lessons learned. Don't rush the pilot. It's called a pilot for a reason. If you're doing a pilot, don't rush it. The technology shouldn't be sexed up. You can make sanitation sexy, but be realistic. Implementation requires skilled and experienced professionals. Piloting requires research skills, and these skills are not always available in emergency and early recovery contexts. There's no such thing as a free toilet. The bile has to be tested. And the kind of context we were working in was actually not really conducive to the dissemination of new technologies. So, some very important lessons learned. Many of them may seem obvious to you, but I think there are still a lot of people out there who are implementing new technologies in contexts that are not appropriate, and I think it's important that we share this information. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And no question for this presentation because it has a lot of networking. One question. Yes. Like, there. Yes, this slide.
Thank you. Good afternoon from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. This is very, very interesting, especially when you follow after the one. I think it's not that the technology is wrong. It's not that the biogas system doesn't function. We are operating in an environment where we, as professionals in this sector, we haven't set the goal to select technology and also get the right partner or industry to operate. We don't have any standard. So anyone can go and build, and there's no clear standard how you do that. Biogas is working in many other places. When you say don't sex it up, why not? Be clear on what you want. And I think the mistake here is there were no standard set, there were no regulation. So it's the wrong setup to really blame any technology in this case will fail. It's not that the process is not working, it's not that the technology is not working. So I think we have to agree in meetings like this. If we come together next time, let's really think about how we develop standards to make sure that we get the right product in those places and solve the problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I know you have many experience about
Can I answer?
household digestion. Let me speak something.
I agree with you entirely. I'm not criticizing the technology, I'm criticizing the way it was implemented. And I think biogas is a very sexy technology, and I think there's a lot of people out there that do not have the experience and the skills to implement it, but they see it and they think that's what we want. That's going to solve our problems. And that's dangerous. And that's why we should be careful. Okay.
Anthony, thanks a lot. That was a fantastic presentation, the way you presented it. And the content, I 100% agree with you. I've done similar research, similar assessments in countries where biogas technology has been implemented. If there is not a strong and really conscious program behind it, these failures are happening. So I do not know exactly the background of this, but I know that in Haiti there was always a cry for biogas. Let's start biogas, short-term experts come in, go out, and so on. And you need a committed team. I would like to add, you had asked me before that I should say something, that's why I raised my hand. 3 sentences. Supply approach fails. Agreed?
Agreed.
The user has to love his biogas plant. Agreed?
Agreed.
You cannot stop the production of biogas, so that all biogas plants which are not functioning are leaking. Agreed? No. Probably tell you later.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, next presentation. Okay, if more discussion, we can after this presentation. Thank you very much. So I will next speaker about the co-fermentation of Faecal sludge with organic waste for energy production in Nasika, India. Look the material from Mr. Yada. Yeah. Please.
Thank you. Today we detail the outcome and working with GIS in India. This presentation is a continuation of Mr. Martin's presentation. What he explained now, regular biogas plant is mostly happening in all over the world. Government for the international agencies that constructing plants, they work for some time and then they fail after some time. Because mostly the issues are technical, sometimes technical, but in most of the cases, especially in India, the issues are contractual arrangements for the financial viability of the plant. So what we are trying in India, this is one project, waste to energy, combining fecal sludge with organic waste. Why we are combining fecal sludge with organic waste? Because fecal sludge, organic plant or based on fecal sludge is not very attractive among the government officials, even the community. We have plant nearby areas that are very difficult to convince them. And the quantity of fecal sludge available in cities also very, in small and medium towns, is not very good available. Good quality of fecal sludge is mostly not available. And the energy production is also not very high as compared to the organic solid waste. So, based on the Hamburg water, they did the research for combining the both waste streams, organic waste and fecal sludge. And based on the results and our studies in India, which are one of the institutions in India, we decided to implement a project to showcase a economically feasible biogas plant based on the mixed waste, like organic and fecal sludge. And to have like a one-stop solution instead of involving multiple players. It is the main reason of failure of the plant. So we are implementing this project in India, Nasik. This project is funded under the International Climate Initiative of Government of Germany. The objectives of this initiative are to support on the climate mitigation, adaptation, and the overall goal is to improve the living conditions in partner countries. So we are supporting Ministry of Urban Development and Ministry of Environment, Government of India. And we are working in some states and cities on urban sanitation. So we are working in both the areas, solid waste and even separate or fecal sludge. So we decided to go ahead with this project and to showcase an example for the Indian cities for the combined scientific treatment of fecal sludge in combination with the organic waste. As I already mentioned, this project is based on 2 waste streams. One is organic waste and second is fecal sludge. Why we make this waste stream? First is the quantity issue. To get the good quality of fecal sludge for the biogas generation, and the quantity of biogas also is not possible everywhere. To make it more economically feasible, solid waste include solid waste, so it will give like source of revenue for collection and transportation. So operator will, contractors will also be interested in such projects. Projects only based on fecal sludge are not very economically acceptable contractors also. So we decided to make this waste and did research. And third is the recycle and reuse of nutrients, energy. And what the most appropriate you can say like India, we hardly have any septic treatment plant. So this is one of the first plants. Now we have one or two plants in some cities, but this is the first plant like we initiated, but due to some political and other issues, it got delayed. So when we designed the plant dimensions were like this. The plant is totally 30-ton plant. It's not really a pilot scale, it's a big plant. It's a 30-ton, and we are using 10 to 15 tons of organic waste from the hotels. We have decided to take a very pure waste stream from the hotels only. Being a pilot scale and we have to showcase example, we don't want to fail. So we decided to take a waste from hotels only. And second waste source is a public toilet from Nasik. So Nasik is having around 500 toilets. So we public toilet, big toilets. They have almost 15% of population depends on toilets. So we have decided to track only that stream. The volume of digester is 1300 meters cube, and energy production what we are expecting around 3,500 kilowatt per hour in given condition. And Mr. Martin mentioned many biogas plants failing off, failed in like Miti or in India. Also there are a lot of biogas plants emerging last decade, but they were working only for like 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, but after that they failed. So we decided to go with the step-by-step approach, and we followed this step like pre-feasibility study for site selection, and feasibility for collection of baseline data, then detailed project report. Then the process with the partner and political negotiation. We could have implemented this project on our own. We could have done a tendering process and could have implemented. But we want our partner to learn and they could implement such projects. So we decided to give this whatever grant is available to our partner and Nasik Corporation and let them decide. So entire process has been done by them. We only supported them technically. So a lot of time we wasted in this process. Like a lot of in India elections are happening, so there is a process of code of conduct. We cannot do anything in that period. So we got delayed by 1.5 years. So currently our project is in construction phase. I'm just presenting the results from the tender and calculation what we did based on our studies. Under pre-feasibility study, we first selected Nasik. Like we had 3-4 cities in our mind. Delhi, being a national capital, the pilot project in Delhi will be a good example to showcase and attraction for the people. But based on several conditions, secured waste, so Nasik is having public toilets, out of like 500 toilets. Then organic waste was available, like 1300 good hotels were there. They have good arrangements of waste collection system. Even they have a good manpower, they have a good team, they have experience in implementation of big projects. But somehow they were failing in the solid waste management and even the septic management. But they have a good exposure to the technology and implementation of big projects. And more importantly, they have a market for the energy and whatever the manure will be generated is available in Nasik. And Nasik Municipal Corporation was ready to pay to the contractor for the O&M of the plant. So these were the main conditions for selection of Nasik. So you can see the population and other things about Nasik. They are around a 16, like 1.6 million, 1.6 million city. It's one of the fastest growing cities in India. So we want them to replicate this plant. So like now also they are thinking to replicate, but we are them to wait with the entire construction of the plant and some operation. In feasibility study, I mentioned they already have a very good solid waste collection system for the hotels and the households, and even they have out of 500 toilets, they have selected 200 public toilets for this project. They were regularly de-sludged and this fecal sludge will be transported to the plant. So they have this system in place. And for economic, like we can construct the plant with the grant, but this plant will be run for we have prepared tender for 10 years. So these are main financial aspects of the plant. Like ready waste of we will to pay shipping with the contractor. Electricity charges in Maharashtra. Nasik is in the Maharashtra state. We have 5 rupees per unit. So it's a good amount to get. Like if contractor can generate 3,000 kilowatt per hour energy, he can get around into 5. You can imagine the amount. And then they have a good regulatory mechanism at corporation level for the collection of both the waste streams. and market for this byproduct, whatever generated from the plant. Again, this concept was proposed by the Hamburg portal, but based on Indian conditions. We did studies in India, in Nashik, based on the real samples with one of the institutions in India. And then we analyzed that ratio of solid waste to separated one has to give better energy production. As already mentioned, fecal sludge doesn't contribute mostly to the energy production, but it supplements energy production by providing. Anyway, you have to mix some water with the organic waste for the production of biogas for digester, for slurry preparation. Instead of that, we can use fecal sludge. We ensure scientific treatment of fecal sludge, plus fecal sludge provides some micronutrients to the digesters. In I don't know what other countries, in India, many digesters are failing after 2-3 years because the absence of these micronutrients. So we say this is one of the source. And other way, scientific treatment is happening in digester, and then we are providing a small sewage treatment plant also for the effluent coming out of the plant. So we are trying to have a zero discharge plant with 100% treatment and reusing everything, manure, even treated effluent and electricity. So the project cost is around 8 crore rupees, 1 million euro. We are providing around 80% grant, and then tender is designed in such a way that the private party will bring 20-30% of his investment to have his ownership in the plant. Because he can give grant and then he can construct and go away. And he will run the plant for 10 years. NMC will, Nashik Municipal Corporation will pay monthly tipping to the operator for 10 years. And in return they will get the electricity. During tendering also we control we want only a good technical party or a contractor we can really reliable and can generate power and run the plant for 10 years. So we control this to the tendering process. The main criteria for selection of the bidder is they do guarantee. Guarantees like they will produce 1100 kilowatt per hour energy from this plant. They will collect the waste from hotels and community toilets. So we don't want multiple parties involved in one project. One person is collecting waste from hotels, other person is collecting waste from toilets, and third person is operating the plant. This is a real problem in India, like not in India, other countries also. If there are multiple people are involved, contracts fail and project, even though technically they are very good, project doesn't operate after some time. So we ensured through the one-stop solution, everything is hand of the one party. This last slide. So tender results are like contractor is asked for the 5 lakh rupees, like 6,000 euros per month and a tipping fee, and in return he will give almost same amount of electricity to NMC. So for NMC is no cost issue. Also NMC is like 450 tons of municipal solid waste, on which they are now wasting like around 6-7 lakh rupees per month. It will be indirectly they will save this money. Whatever additional electricity the contractor will generate, he will sell it to any other party. So we ensure through this the project will be financially viable. The contractor will not run away or NMC will not stop paying tipping fee. So mixing solid waste gives this advantage to us or NMC. Like they are collecting solid waste and mixing with separate. So project is financially viable. So now what based on our tender and like we have started the construction. The decisions what we have taken, like conducting feasibility studies and detailed DPR. So now we got good site for the project, and we are doing capacity building also for the corporation and the contractor. Basically, contractors are more interested in technology concept, and we are focusing this as one of the business models. Like it can be a sustainable business model in any developing country or any small and medium town. So these are our learning from this project. Most probably within the next 6-7 months, the construction will be completed and project will start now. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Christian answers about this large-scale biogas plant for fecal sludge and organic waste. So very good case study. This there, Miss.
Thank you. Interesting. My name is Aart van der Beukel. I work for SuSanA in the Netherlands and Ghana. We do something similar, but then in Accra. So I was also wondering the scale you are mentioning now. What is it based on? Is it a cost factor or is it based on the market situation?
It's based on both cost factor also and market also. Because the plant was like decided and based on our technical calculations, we didn't do that. Like it's based on both the grant and the market factors. So this plant can be viable for like at least 10 years, at this scale. But we go down then we need to take entire calculation.
Yeah. Do you think you could double it or even triple it in 4 years?
Even like we got a lot of requests from the private party that can we increase the scale of the plant, but we are going to wait. In next phase we can then have a more plant or similar plant of like 2-3 plants in the same also.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Yes. Last question.
Hello, I'm SuSanA from Northwest University in South Africa. I just wanted to know if there was any kind of pre-treatment. I didn't quite get that of the organic fraction and of the organic waste fraction, and maybe what was the reasoning for the retention time? Why 35 days, which is pretty long?
No, pre-treatment we have planned for the pasteurization before digestion. So this is one of the projects we have planned for the pasteurization. Whatever excess energy will be generated in the plant will be used for the pasteurization before waste goes to the digestion after steading.
And the retention?
Retention time is a continuous process. It depends 30-35 days. A big plant, 1300 meter cube. So it's around 20 or 30 days is required for this digestion process.
So good. Thank you, Mr. Yaga. Thank you very much for this discussion. Okay, now fourth presentation about use biomethane potential test to measure methane production from digestion and co-digestion of fecal matter and organic substance. From Mr. John Joy. Okay. So please give a presentation. Okay, maybe we need next from next you can. Okay, we come a last presentation about anaerobic digestion, fast utilization, sanitation in multiple context from Professor Easthouse, Department of Civil Engineer, as environment engineer. Look at your first finish.
Look at the.
No, I think maybe you must. Okay, we come back to presentation 4 using biomethane potential test to measure methane product from digestion and co-digestion. Please.
Hello, I'm presenting on assessing the biomethane potential and concomitant packaging removal of humidity, feces, with or without organic substrates. My name is Joy Ringo. I'm a PhD student in UNESCO IIT Delft. I have two professors, Dr. Mariska Ronterkamp and Prof. Jules Van Leer. So UNESCO IIT is in partnership with a company in Kenya called Synergy. Synergy deals with sanitation improvement within the informal slum settlement. So Synergy fabricates toilets and sell them to willing buyers within the settlement. The waste collected from these facilities is normally collected by SuSanA staff using low-cost transportation systems. This waste is delivered to the central treatment plant for the synergy for treatment. So every day, we normally receive about 6 to 7 tons of waste, 3.5 being UDDT feces. And it's important to note that this UDDT feces, after every use, you normally have about 10 grams of sawdust being added. So here I'm dealing with dry UDDT feces, and like other presentations which are fecal sludge. So for this waste, every day it is really increasing, and currently the treatment option which is being used is composting. But we are really receiving a lot as days go by. So SuSanA is seeking to diversify the treatment options. So currently we have systems which are going, such as the Braxidifly, the biochar, and anaerobic digestion. So I fit in the anaerobic digestion. We want to start a big digester where we are going to treat this waste. So what is it that we are really interested in treating this waste? We really want to check the potential for treating UDDT feces using anaerobic digestion. We also want to look at pathogen removal, because all the waste that we treat there must be reused. And for reuse, it must be pathogen-free. And we're also looking at the potential for treating with any other type of organic waste. So for my experiments, for my testing, I used the BMP test, the biochemical methane potential test. It's just a serum bottle whereby I put my test substrate. I add an inoculum. Inoculum is normally from an existing anaerobic digester. And then I have my nutrient media, which is macro, micro, and also trace elements. So what were the main objectives of my study? Here I put 4, but each succeeding came as a result of a preceding objective. So in the first case, I wanted to look at individual anaerobic digestion of the organic waste, which was common within the slum settlement. So the first one, which is the main one, is UDDT feces. I also had whey, I also had food waste, and vegetable waste. So after getting results from that first objective, I came up with the next one, which was for digestion of UDDT feces and mixed vegetable waste. I also looked at pathogen removal in digestion of organic waste, and then PFA effect on pH and E. coli. My waste substrates. The first one, the main one, is UDDT feces, which, as you heard, I collected from the containers collected by SuSanA. Then the organic waste I collected from an informal slum settlement, which is called Mukulu Panjenga, where SuSanA is located. Then this inoculum I obtained from already existing digesters within the slum settlements, fixed room digesters. So for my test procedure, I used 100 ml serum bottles. I add an inoculum to substrate ratio of 2:1. I added my nutrients. These include macro, micro, and trace elements. Then in this bottle, I added water to a working volume of 8 ml. I adjusted my pH to 7, and then added sodium hydrogen carbonate, which acted as a buffer. I crossed the sealant bottles and bubbled argon gas in order to create anaerobic conditions inside the head space. My reactors were incubated at 35 degrees. I didn't have an automatic shaker, so it was done manually, except at night when we are asleep. Then in addition, I had a blank sample. Blank sample was supposed to collect for gas production from the inoculum mix. So for conducting my experiments, each of the tests I did in 3 batches. Each batch using waste from different days and locations. And each batch was done in triplet kits. For my measurements, biogas measurement, I did by measuring the pressure inside the head space. The pressure inside obeys the equation of state of an ideal gas. So it was possible to convert from pressure to volume measurements. Then for my methane, I passed my biogas through about 5% sodium hydroxide solution. So the CO2 in the gas is trapped out by the sodium hydroxide. So the volume of methane displaced will give me the percentage of methane in the gas. E. coli, I use the chromocode agar technique. While for the BFA, I use the titration method. So in this titration method, I had to collect for background acidity. Because in this method, even organic acids which are not volatile are measured as volatile. So for collection of background acidity, I used 1 cylindrical bottle which had already produced biogas until there was no more production. So I measured BFA from this setup and subtracted from the value I got in the experiments I do. Then, for my results, for the batch study, these are some of the characteristics I got. Of interesting was the pH. The food waste, the pH was about 4.5, which was similar to whey. The feces, the UDDT feces, the pH was about 7. So for my single substrate digestion, the first graph, which is for the vegetable waste, gas production was very steady in the first days, upon which it reached a plateau. Then for the second one, which is for the whey, it has a funny behavior. Immediately I set the experiment, there was rapid gas production. But then after that, there was zero. No gas was being produced. This is a trend which I decided to investigate why it behaved like this, and that's why I came up with another objective about the effect of BFA, like maybe the pH effect. But after some days, after about 10 days, the gas production resumed, and then I also had a steady rise, just like the case for vegetable waste, until it reached a plateau. For UDDT feces, it was steady, like the vegetable waste, until the plateau stage, similar to food waste. But food waste, it was difficult to get a representative sample, especially from the slum settlements. So the waste used was a bit different, and that's the difference in the results that I obtained. So for the methane production, the food waste had the highest production with about 452 mils methane per gram BS added. This was followed by vegetable waste, and then feces, and lastly it was whey. But feces recorded the highest percentage in methane in the biogas. Then for the co-digestion experiments, I used 2 ratios of vegetable waste to food waste. 1:1 and 2:1. I used vegetable waste simply because in the single substrate digestion, there was rapid rise in gas production in vegetable waste without acidification of the reactor. There was so much gas production. So I wanted to add this vegetable waste to feces so as to kickstart the process very quickly. Because what we really want is a system which is very quick in gas production for the feces. We want to have the minimum retention time as possible. Then, for this effect here of BFA on E. coli, this I just did with 2. I did with whey, I did with UDDT feces. Why did I do with whey? For whey, we realized that graph in gas production acted funny, and also we acted very funny. And then for the feces is my main substrate. I wanted to see how it behaved. So for the graphs that you can see here for the BFA for whey, once I set the experiment, the BFA rose from about 8.5 to 45.5 milliequivalents per liter. This is within 1 night, which was very high. But when we look at the one which is for the feces, this one was just about 7 to 8. That is the rise in BFA. But when we look, we follow the trend for BFA in whey and the pH for whey, an increase in BFA in whey led to a significant decrease in pH. The pH dropped from 7 to 5.0. This made the reactor acidic, and that is why the gas production in that reactor ceased. But for the feces, both the VFA and the feces remained almost approximately stable. There was no much changes. So for the weight, within the first day, the VFA rose from 8.5 to 45.5. And then after rising to 45.5, we can see it dropped. It started dropping again. And once it started dropping to around day 10, when we look at the graph for gas production, the gas started to increase. Then for the pH, dropped from 7 to 5.707 within the first day, but after that, it started increasing again, and the gas production resumed. So for the whey, E. coli was undetectable by day 10, while in feces, it took database with a K value of 0.5. So in conclusion, I can say that high VFA is a precursor to methane production. And then the VFA buildup in digester improves the sanitization effect of the waste. Then in co-digestion, the more the mixed vegetable waste fraction, the more the CH4 produced. The more you add your organic waste, the more the gas you produce. And then the fourth one, it is very possible to restart methane production after inhibition by low pH. This was observed in the case of whey. Then database were required for E. coli removal in UDDT at 35 degrees centigrade. So for this one, the next work that I'm doing on is focusing on the VFA, looking at VFA destruction of pathogens using VFA in the reactors. This is what I'm now focusing on, so that I have a treatment step before introducing my waste into the reactor. So in this case, for these experiments, L-mean X is something which is very vital, which I did not check for this experiment. The reason was, at that particular time, something was not very okay with those tests, but now the tests for the experiments I'm dealing with now, here the L-mean X are being considered.
Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm not sure if you mentioned it, but I want to know, did you test food to different food to microorganism ratio for the biomethane effectiveness? Food to microorganism ratio. I think you on one of the first slides you said it was inoculum to substrate ratio. It's kind of the same thing.
Inoculum to substrate ratio?
Yeah, you said that you test two. Yeah, is it the only one that you test, or you did?
No, I tested that one because previous research has shown if you use more than 2:1, you get a certification in your reactor, especially for these which are batch scale. So if you have more of the substrate, then you are certified the reactor. So I wanted to have a system whereby the reactor will work up to the end of my experiment. I didn't want cases of a certification.
And maybe just so you said that the temperature was 35?
That's
35, yeah. And I didn't, how can you manage to keep the temperature at 35?
I used a controlled incubator.
Oh.
Okay. So thank you. Yes. Next speaker. So about anaerobic digestion, fast neutralization, clean sanitation in multiplier context. From Professor Marco Horses, Department of Civil and Engineering, Environmental Engineering, Duke University, USA. Please.
Thank you.
rejected. So maybe you. Well, maybe I'll start with a little joke, totally unrelated to kind of losing the atmosphere. So there's 3 engineers in a hot air balloon, and they're flying over some area, and they see one guy on the ground and say, hey, where are we? And the guy takes a while to look up, and takes a while, and says, you're in a hot air balloon. And the engineers are like, wow, this guy must be a mathematician. Any mathematician in the audience? No? Yeah, because his answer made sense. He took a while to respond, and it was totally useless. All right, we're engineers. We're trying to make solutions and come up. Okay, I'll stop talking and I'll bring my presentation. Sorry? Are you going to finish the joke? The joke? No, the joke was just that
Okay.
Maybe it's been a little bit. So the joke was just that the mathematician took a while to answer. His answer made sense.
Yes.
And it was totally useless.
Okay.
All right, very good. I'm very pleased to have my presentation and tell you about our system, the ADPL, Anaerobic Digestion, Pasteurization, and Training. And I'd like to start just with acknowledging the contribution of my co-authors and Aaron, who's there, who's done the hard work in 3 different countries, including in my lab. And also the great help we had from partners on the ground, as well as funding from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, originally with a GCE grant and then some follow-on for demonstration projects. And this is our system, this is our vision. It's a self-sanitizing toilet, and it is working as follows. Essentially, imagine here a toilet. We don't want much water. Less is better. The waste goes in an anaerobic digester that produces biogas. And then we're using the biogas in a very efficient heater and heat exchanger system. Pasteurized via. It's very simple. No moving parts. Very few things can go wrong. And I need to fast forward through the research that was done in the lab. I presented that 2 years ago. But here you see some of the results done with this small digester with a fecal simulant. And the essence is that we get a fair amount of biogas. It's not huge, and you cannot cook meals for entire families just on that. But it's a fair amount of energy. And it depends on how much nitrogen we get, and as we've heard, most of the nitrogen comes from the urine, and it's a big unknown, is for such toilets, are people going to go to bushes, or will they use the toilets for people? But nevertheless, this is the take-home message. You get a fair amount of biogas, and you have to use that for heat disinfection. I want to just stress the fact that our system is not producing clean water. Nobody's going to drink it, but it is safe. It's being disinfected. The pathogens are being killed. This is what comes out in the lab. This is from field systems, and what you see is definitely not clean water. This is the heat pasteurization system. Let me walk you through how it works. All gravity feed. This actually is a system that was displayed at the fair in New Delhi. And the waste comes here from the digester, passes through the heat exchanger. You see it's insulated, and then goes into the biogas powered heater. There's a Bunsen burner here. Everything is very efficient here. The Energy Star rated if it was in the US. And then we strive to get about 17 degrees C. We know from basic temperature time charts that this is sufficient for pasteurization. Then when it comes out, the heat is conveyed to the fluid going in. Again, all gravity feed, no moving parts. These are systems made in Kenya, and people were able to replicate our system local to Smith. And here are results from the lab with E. coli under controlled conditions for different set point temperatures for the heater. And it's showing that when we try and get those high temperatures, we can get total disinfection. So here we have 7 log reductions or more. When the temperature is lower, we don't get this much reduction. So we learned from this that we should really try and get about 7 degrees. The other take-home message is that, and I forgot to mention that those systems that I was showing you on the pictures, those are not scaled down. They are for 10 people, roughly. They did full scale. And then it would take only something like 200 to 280 liters of biogas to run. And that is less than what can be produced by a family of 10. So we know from this that we have enough biogas to run the heat pasteurization. So let's move on to the field studies. And those started in the summer of 2013 in Kenya, in Eldoret. And then this past summer, Aaron spent some time in the Philippines and in India. And you can see here some pictures and schematics. I'm going to walk through each one of them and extract some lessons, highlight some results. Okay. Let me just get back. I didn't push the right buttons, so I don't know. Yeah, no, I just write arrows, so you want to know. Okay, this is the systems that are in Eldoret. We're at 3 different locations at estates that are like small 1-bedroom apartments, and they share pit-and-trays. And then we installed a system that looked like that with 3 stalls, and they serve in the different estates. They serve 17, 35, and 24 residents. It's a lot of rotation. There's an owner there, and the owner is key to having a functional system that works well. I'll come back on that a little later. You can see the characteristics here. The digester is underneath the toilets, and it's all gravity feed. See the digester here, the heat exchanger, and the heater. We have a drum to collect the final effluent just for safety before releasing it and testing. Here's some characteristics about the startup. The seeding and the startup of those systems is very important. And so we went through a gradual procedure acclimation to make sure that the bacteria are not subject to too high loading of nitrogen from the start. This is important. We have a good maintenance check because this is also an R&D project. We want to make sure we have a good follow-up on what's going on. And really important on these systems with making sure that the burn of the flame is on. Some of the feedback we got is that the people were very intrigued, very interested, and very excited about the systems. They reported less odors, less flies. They liked the fact that the systems were well lit. They didn't like the fact that they had to climb some stairs to get to the toilets. And there was some concern about elderly people and about kids. What we found is that in 2 of the locations, they worked really well. We had really good gas production. The system were continuously on. In one of the locations, the owner was not particularly cooperative, and that led to some issues. And well, it obvious, people on the ground are not cooperating. If the owner is not selling the system correctly, essentially, it's not going to be a success. Here's some results. I'm showing temperatures, and you can see essentially that the system at south, the green is the one where temperatures are flaming off. The system has low usage, and we had also the lowest gas production. I'm reporting here really briefly the cost. It's a very cheap system. The majority of the cost is in the structure and the building of the toilet. But look at the cost, $800 for the digester. I think we got robbed a little bit by the local tinsmith, but $200 for the heat system is really, really inexpensive. And really the take-home message is that with proper maintenance, we're able to maintain good temperatures and those will guarantee that the effluent is pasteurized. Here is some influent, effluent, and COD removal data in the upper land use. These are good numbers. I want to move on to the Philippines. Very different context here. We had the Tesari Foundation hear about our work, and they wanted to try it and include that in a campaign to essentially improve sanitation in civil islands. And so what we did is we provided technical advising, and they replicated our system. It was really interesting to see that they could do it with minimal explanations. We spent a lot of time on email and others, but they could really replicate our system. You can see some pictures here of the general context, and the system is shown here. Again, the idea was to do an educational campaign, so this is an educational system, one toilet, and a treatment system underneath. This is the digester and two biogas collectors. You can see the heat sterilization system. Let's move on. Same startup procedure that we use in Kenya. However, there we had fewer users, too few users, in fact, and that also gave some problems in terms of biogas production. You can see it's really low. We can only run the heater for a couple hours and then out of gas. It really shows that it's not like the sweet spot is tiny, but you have to be within specifications, otherwise the system is not going to work. And so what we're doing now is trying to encourage them to supplement them with swine manure and increase the usage there. We, in parallel, teamed up with Iram Scientific from India and put our system at the tail end of the e-toilet, and you're probably familiar with the e-toilet. It's an automated system that is shown over here, and this is our treatment system. It is the system that was displayed at the Delhi Fair, and we are positioned the unit in a dorm at the Madras campus, which gave us great access to a very good quality of time. It's been great in doing the monitoring, the analysis, providing students, and so on. And so here's more pictures of the system with your cubic meter digester. We do have a pump that takes the waste from the toilet and pumps it into our digester. We have our nicely US-made heat disinfection system, all stainless steel. And on this system, we're using microcontrollers to monitor temperature, to turn on and off the flame. It sounds sophisticated, but actually it's very inexpensive and shows a lot of promise. It is shown here. Here's some of the highlights of the operation. Again, we see that the system startup is important. This is the usage that we get. So originally we had some issues because the e-toilet took a few seconds or 30 seconds to open when users wanted to use it, and they had other toilets just next door. And so they were like, okay, we're going to get to the one that's open right away. But that's being addressed. You see here that we had some really good COD and total suspended solid removal. I'll show you coliform in a minute. The cost here is really inflated because we have a fancy digester that's fiberglass, and the fancy stainless steel unit. Here's some fecal coliform counting, the improvement after the digester in the final effluent. I do want to mention that we've had issues with the heat system, and so those represent data where the heat isn't fully functional. So I don't view this as being full potential of our system. What you see is that even through the digester, we're getting some reduction. We do expect that when our infection system is fully functional, this will be much lower. So this is my last slide. What's the take-home message? Well, the system works, and it works very well. We think it's very promising because it's so simple, and it's quite inexpensive. It has to be done right, and when it's done right, it can run on its own, and we can get temperatures that we know will have a major effect on pathogens. And we'll get off gas. We have surplus gas in 2 of the locations in Kenya. The concept is scalable, and it can be replicated as the experience in the Philippines shows. And it's been very interesting to be in 3 different countries, working with different partners in different contexts, and learning from these experiences. So where do we go from here? Well, we're working in the lab on improving the systems, on optimizing gas production, in particular on the anaerobic digestion. But there's a lot that can be done in terms of design. We know design is extremely important for a successful product. We want to do demonstration at a greater scale. We have 5 systems, but I think we need many more in the field to learn the laws about how it needs to be deployed in engineering, right? And of course, the business aspects are important. So with this, I just want to conclude that I don't know if I have time for questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, question, one more question. Oh, okay, first slide and then you. Okay. Yes, your first. No problem. You are first. Okay.
Go right ahead. Thank you, Mark. This is a great presentation. I was wondering what would be the potential option to clean the effluent. So when you want to go to scale, I think this will become another big challenge.
Yes, and it all depends what you want to do with the effluent. We know that the treatment as we do it doesn't do anything for nitrogen, and that keeps the nutrient value. And particularly in the cases of the Kenya experience, all these estates are little plots, and the idea is that the people are actually very excited about how much nitrogen is being produced, and they could use that as fertilizer. In the case of ERAM, they want water because they want flushing. And we're working in the lab in terms of developing new post-treatment. And we know that for post-treatment, we need to remove suspended solids, and we need to deal with the nitrogen. And indirectly, we have to deal with the fact that the liquid is smell. It's going to take some research. We're not yet there. But I think potentially we could get there where some of the water can be reused. This is a great question. Thanks.
Yes. Okay, please you.
It was such a good question.
What's the same question?
The same question. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Professor.
Right. Thank you very much.
This was it. Maybe we can discuss later. Okay, last presentation. The synthetic surrogate for the optimization of anaerobic digestion for fecal sludge from Marginia Basin, Sanitation, Switzerland. Okay, please.
Thank you for the introduction and thank you for you all being here. I'm happy to present you this today. I hope you still have some energy for this last session. I will try to be quite quick. If we get fixed with the... Okay, so today I would like to present you a side part of a project and a PhD that I'm conducting. It's about synthetic surrogate for the optimization of anaerobic digestion for fecal sludge, and this work was done with different students who are Kevin Galanda, and Amédée Ferré from EPFL in Lausanne, and Lungi Tuma, for UKT and ZN in Durban. So first, I would like to go quickly through introduction and coming back a few years ago about how we have developed wastewater treatment and compare this with fecal sludge treatment. This would lead me to present you the need for fecal sludge surrogate and how we can use it for anaerobic digestion. So, we all come from wastewater field, even though we are all here to treat fecal sludge management. Why? Because all these activities, treatment technologies we try to apply were actually developed for wastewater. But wastewater wasn't developed in 20 years. Wastewater treatment was developed in about 100 years. And therefore, we have been testing different solutions at different scales. There were large-scale, mid-scale, but also small-scale tests at laboratory conditions. The goal was to understand mechanism and optimize efficiency. And that's where I'm coming from. Fecal sludge, we still don't have a very good efficiency, otherwise I think we would have something else to do or to speak than what we are speaking all together. It's a quite new field of research. I would say very first researcher began to work about that in the 80s, so that's 30 years, not 100. And we have been implementing wastewater treatment technologies for fecal sludge. That's something strange. And often we didn't really have time to really see how this is actually implemented. So how can we really use fecal sludge on wastewater technologies? We could observe lots of failure, and there are several reasons for that, but also sometimes technologies were not well adapted. So we could conclude that first we need to develop fecal sludge treatment technologies based on fecal sludge management criteria or properties or problematics. That's quite logical. But also, as we have seen, there are different levels of tests, and it can be useful to have first small-scale tests. And therefore, we need different type of scales, and this small-scale test can be used to understand how treatment mechanism can be applied to fecal sludge. So the point of my presentation today is that first for wastewater treatment, we have been using a lot of different surrogates, but we don't have these surrogates for fecal sludge. I have already been asked by several colleagues, hey, do you already have your synthetic feces? We really want to use them. Not only for anaerobic digestion, but also. And as we have been discussing the whole session, there are still some needs for understanding in the field of anaerobic digestion of fecal sludge. Today, oh sorry, it's really light. I hope you see something. Today, I will mainly speak about fecal sludge from septic tanks. So this is a liquid waste. It's important to announce that. And that's liquid waste that's already partly stabilized. So it's not the same as the case of toilets. I would like to present you quickly this in the framework of this project, which I'm running here in Vietnam. It's also interesting because it's based on Vietnamese situation. The name of the project is Partnership for Urban Resource Recovery, and the main goal of this project is to assess potential for anaerobic digestion of fecal sludge. So all of this is concerned at a centralized scale, it's not at a scale of a toilet. We are conducting several activities. I don't want to go through all of them, but today I will focus mainly on optimization of anaerobic digestion for fecal sludge. To really understand the process efficiency, how we can optimize this efficiency, we need to have constant substrate to do the first test. That's quite, I see heads shaking, I don't know if it's for yes or not, but that can be useful to understand what are the real mechanisms that are efficient in producing biogas or inactivating pathogen or degrading biological matter. It's also sometimes useful to perform tests without changing external conditions. So, important aspects I wanted to consider for these surrogates were first biological content. Of course, biological properties are very important when you come to use anaerobic digestion, not only because you want to understand your total biodegradable organic matter, but also because we have recalcitrant compounds in fecal sludge that are not easily degraded through anaerobic digestion, and that's especially important in fecal sludge coming from septic tanks. Also, physical properties are important. First of all, we have seen that you have several aspects related to that coming to the operation of anaerobic digesters, but also solids are serving as attachment sites for the pathogens. So several viruses, for example, they like to be attached to solids and they get inactivated slower if there are solids than non-solids. I would like to say that there are already existing recipes. I saw that some of us were already using them, but some of them are either only liquid or only solid, and they cannot be representative for biological properties. So until now, we still lack the perfect recipe, I would say, which I will not present you today for these tests. The objectives of our work was to develop a recipe for reliable and replicable tests representing biodegradation potential, heterogeneous solid content, and also being able to adjust it to different fecal sludge characteristics. Our goal was also to have controlled and safe-to-use components so that anyone can do it in different countries, and to obtain a recipe that is easily and rapidly reproducible, again in different countries. Finally, of course, as I said, I would like to use it on optimization of anaerobic digestion, and that's what's coming now. How did we proceed? Yeah, you see some of the people here around again. So that's a characterization study that was conducted here in Hanoi with Adam, who is also here present. And the goal was to really understand what's the characteristics are, what are the characteristics of fecal sludge, and also how is the organic matter composed. That's not the topic of my talk today, but just to say that based on these characteristics, we selected several compounds and decided how we can mix them in order to really reach similar characteristics, so we can obtain a surrogate that's similar to the real fecal sludge. We could actually do that. That was the first step, but we also wanted to verify that these similar sludge would have a similar behavior when we put it in the digester. And we wanted to monitor that through biogas production. So we also conducted biomethane potential tests. Thanks for our previous presenter, so that I don't need to present the whole methodology now. And that's the surrogate recipe we obtain. So it might be funny, but that can be useful too. We used crushed walnut and straw flour. Straw flour mainly representing recalcitrant organic matter, and crushed walnut can be representing more available organic matter and accounting also for lipids. But you can use other kind of just vegetables. We use carolinids to represent inorganic small particles, and different chemicals can also be used to represent for nutrient. And of course, the water content can be adjusted based on water. You can just see here some characteristics of walnut and straw, which are interesting because they are quite different, and then it makes it easy to mix to reach different characteristics. The biomethane potential test we did in Switzerland, And we did that with Swiss fecal sludge, so also from septic tank, and therefore we had synthetic surrogate adapted to this Swiss fecal sludge. We conducted the test at thermophilic temperature, so at 55 degrees, and you can just see here that we could obtain similar properties between the Swiss fecal sludge and the synthetic fecal sludge, except for total phosphorus. We had other results, but just to quickly present you. Yeah, I hope you see the line for the blank, which is here. So the blank was only thermophilic inoculum, the production just due to the inoculum. Something interesting is that first, we have actually production with production of biogas with fecal sludge from septic tank, which is very often discussed because people often think we can only produce biogas with fresh fecal sludge, but actually also with partly digested fecal sludge you can produce biogas based on this data, which is very limited data. With similar characteristics, we obtain similar biomethane production between 10 and 30 days of digestion. That's only one test, so we will conduct more. But we had a different behavior at the beginning, where we had inhibition due to probably VFA accumulation in the surrogate, due to the surrogate. So this is something we can fix. But the interesting thing is that at the end we have similar production for similar characteristics. I will be using these, so that was just a side study, I would say, to perform more tests. The goal of this study is to adapt different operational and configuration of anaerobic digestion in order to reduce the pathogens through anaerobic digestion. We all agree that anaerobic digestion is not the perfect technology per se to completely inactivate pathogens, but different setups exist in order to improve inactivation of pathogens. So I will be using, for example, biphasic anaerobic digestion, and these tests will be performed based on fecal sludge characteristics in Hanoi, but with synthetic surrogates. So we can perform tests in Switzerland for fecal sludge of Hanoi at very small scale. I would like to conclude that we all agree implementation is crucial, it's very important, that's where we are all heading, but it's also expensive and sometimes it can be useful to have preliminary tests. Synthetic surrogate can contribute to understand treatment mechanism and obtain quantitative data and in controlled conditions. It can also be used to test new substrates on known technologies or new technologies. And it's a quite low cost optimization that can also be used, for example, to test one technology setup for different contexts. So I could test my setup based on characteristics of fecal sludge from Hanoi, but I could also test the same setup based on characteristics of fecal sludge from Dakar or any part of the world as soon as I can adapt the synthetic surrogate. So that's just an example of something that can also be useful for other technologies. I would like to thank you all for your attention and just acknowledge our funder, the Swiss State Secretariat for Economic Effort, and as I really like this word, come on.
Thank you. Okay. One more question? Oh! So, lady first.
Thank you, Marguerite, for this presentation. You have shown that you are now, based on your recipe, you can design whatever fecal sludge you want, but you're looking on some key parameters, the typical parameters used to characterize fecal sludge. And we've seen at the beginning of this session
there may be some other parameters we're not looking at are also important to influence the process. So how can you be sure that your copy of fecal sludge is really representing the real one?
Thanks for the question. That was a short set of parameters I wanted to show you, but we also tested carbohydrates, both proteins and lipids, and other parameters such as pH and VFA in order to characterize that. And we are not as near as for these basic parameters, which are easy to adjust. But the important point for us was that we can actually produce similar content of biogas. And the next thing we will be looking at is how the pathogens behave with real and surrogate fecal sludge. But we could also adjust pretty much all the other parameters.
Okay. So, Christian?
Yeah, I guess my question was on the pathogen side. It's almost as if you have to simulate also absorption sites, surface area, surface chemistry. I mean, there's a bunch of things that will affect pathogen fate. So I don't know how you're thinking about going. How you're thinking about doing that.
We will not represent very coarse material, but with this, you can just crush the walnut at the size you want, if it's just a question of size, and or have the flour at the size you want. But that's still surrogate, so it's not exactly representing the real fecal sludge. And then we can spike the different pathogens we want, but we can also run side studies with real fecal sludge and synthetic fecal sludge and verify if this is similar.
Okay. So, July? Oh, hi.
Sorry. I just have a really quick clarification.
Yes.
Sorry. It's Virginia Gardner from Louisville. Thank you, that was really interesting. I just wanted to know, I wasn't sure which test for mesophilic, thermophilic, there was mention of thermophilic inoculum. If you could have just clarified the temperatures of the tests that you were doing.
So we actually did several tests also at mesophilic temperature, but these were not very successful, not because the surrogate was not successful, but we had we had some errors in the process. This test was performed at thermophilic temperature at 55 degrees. And the inoculum was also taken from thermophilic biodigester that was run at 55 degrees.
Thermophilic. Okay, right. Your last question.
But this is a question for almost everyone who presented in this session, including yourself, chairing the session. I know you're also an expert in the biogas technology. We've seen presentation where some researchers are trying to find a good mixing ratio to increase gas production. And this is an interesting study which is coming out with. Now we can have synthetic product and maybe do a lot of modeling. I've seen from Columbia University, how you can base your design on how much VFA is already coming when you collect fecal sludge. Is there a way that this group can maybe tweak some of those models and propose quickly what are key design parameters? So how can we get there? Because we can continue running a lot of experimentation. People are waiting for answers, and we need to start pushing at least some solution forward, and then push the research in the lab at the same time. So my question is, anyone can answer to this. So is it a way that this group can come together and make some very good suggestions on what would be the major design criteria, key design criteria for fecal sludge anaerobic?
Okay, thank you. I just have a answer question. The question would be, what are your main treatment goals? Is it pathogen? Is it production of biogas? Is it reduction of biodegradable organics? And I know you will answer I want everything. So, yeah, we need to work together because some of us have different focus, and together we could do something better.
So, okay. Yes, thank you. So I think maybe have 5 minutes to make a conclusion. Normally I want to invite always 6 speakers compared to make some discussion, but I think the time is always over. So, but I also want to do a little bit of conclusion with a very interesting and valuable speakers' presentations. From our first presentation, this is a scientific, pilot project with very important operating biogas parameters with 6 times 10 cubic meter reactor with multi physics, digester degree like that. Very interesting gas analyzer and parameter analyzers. That's good. So, second, we have heating this hot water digester. Okay, that's very difficult conditions and the countries to 2 times 4 pieces hospital digester. Of course, we cannot compare with China. We have 40 million hospital digester, but that's starting. That's not very easy. Also very interesting. So the third presentation is about this business model, and that is industrialized biogas digester with Faecal sludge and organic waste with different ratio 1 to 1.5, 1 to 2. That's very important. That's for GTC, Deutsche Gesellschaft für Zusammenarbeit. So that is co-fermentation biogas digester, industrialized, large scale. There's not too much in this world. We know we have many biogas plants, but mostly with livestock manure, agriculture biogas plant called like that. But now it's the waste Faecal sludge or we can say organic waste to energy. That's waste to energy project. Very interesting. So this fourth presentation is about this batch presentation, right? This is no co-fermentation. What's this? Oh, that is a batch test from you. Okay, that's laboratory, very small, with Faecal sludge, with different organic waste, food waste, and whey, and different. That's also very interesting from different gas production and co-fermentation and pure organic, pure Faecal sludge. So with 35 to 40 retention time, like that, maximum gas production, what's its conditions. So, fifth presentation about pellet, biogas, and heating, energy conversion from our professor. That's very important for sterilize and record infection. How can this cooling reduce and for hygienic aspect to do it? Of course, that's quite small, but in different countries we have to some tests. Oh, it's quite interesting. Has very good COD removal rate and the TSS removal rate. So last one we have already heard from this business. That is synthetic surround gate. That is with bio and chemical agent. It's a little bit expensive, but that is maybe also scientific research potential for this Faecal sludge treatment. So let me say thank you all of the 6 speakers. So thank you participate. I think all today's topic about anaerobic biogas integrate link to Faecal sludge management. I have to say that is a very important part. We want to use our biogas to produce energy, and then we want to increase our the economic benefit for Faecal sludge treatment. So maybe some people say, oh, that's very expensive. Please, biogas expensive, just like a car. You can drive Mercedes, you can drive BMW, but you can also drive, Jetta or the Passat. So I think for developed country, Is German passive enough? Most important, must function, must economically. So let us cooperation throughout today's conference. We can set up platform to exchanging, knowledge exchanging, technology exchanging, information exchanging. Please keep contact. Thank you. Close today.